Welcome to another video from ExplainingComputers.com. This time I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of databases. Specifically, I'm going to explain how to create and use tables, forms, queries and reports in the free application LibreOffice Base. So let's go and get started. All databases store data in one or more tables. Like spreadsheets, these consist of rows and columns, although a row is called a record, with each record comprised of one or more fields. For example, in an inventory table, there may be fields for stock code, product, quantity, and supplier. In so-called relational databases, such as Microsoft Access or LibreOffice Base, tables can also be linked together. So, our inventory table may have a relationship with a supplier table that stores contact details to avoid data duplication. Alongside tables, databases use forms to display, enter, and edit data, with a form often presenting one record at a time. Next, queries are used to manipulate and extract data. And finally, reports can be generated from tables or queries to allow data to be printed or to be exported as a PDF or other document file. To illustrate these different kinds of object in action, I've created a simple database to store information on devices like these, which are known as single-board computers or SBCs. Specifically, we have a number of tables, and the main table here is called computers, and it includes information on all the different computers in the database, as we can see. And there's also a table that contains information on the different processors they may contain. I've also created a number of forms, not least we've got this main form, which allows us to flick through all the information in the database with the information we see drawn from a couple of different tables. I've also created some queries up here to extract various information according to specific criteria, for example, like that. Very exciting. And finally, we've got some reports. So for example, this report brings up all of the SBCs in the database listed by processor type. So let's go back in time and build the database we just looked at. The base program is part of LibreOffice, which is free to download for Windows, macOS and Linux, and is very straightforward to install. However, when you first run it up, you may get an error saying that you need to install the 64-bit Java runtime environment. And if this is the case, you need to visit java.com, download the 64-bit version for your operating system, and execute the install process. And then, following a reboot, LibreOffice Base should work just fine. You can run it up, because I'm running it up here in the Windows. There it is like that. However, for the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to switch across to run Base in Linux Mint, simply because it allows me to scale the fonts to read better on video. So, the options we now have are to open an existing database or to create a new database, which is what we're going to do. So I'll click on Next, where if we wish, we can register the database on the computer we're using. And this is useful if we want to access the database from other programs. So, for example, we may want to create an address database that we can access to perform a mail merge in LibreOffice Writer. But here, we're not going to be doing anything like that, so I'm going to click on No, do not register a database, and Finish. And we now need to enter a file name, and our database has been created. Next, we need to set up our tables, and one way to do this is to select the Use Wizard to create table option, and this gives us the table wizard where lots of templates are included. So for example, we could set up an expenses database using these fields over there like that, or maybe we could go to personal and set up something like a household inventory database using the fields like that. However, nothing here in the templates is really suitable for our purposes, so I'm going to click on cancel, and we'll create our first table from scratch by clicking on Create Table in Design View, like that. And this is going to be our main table where we need to enter all of our field names and to set their field type and to enter a description if we wish. So the first thing to note is that every table needs to have what's called a primary key that will uniquely identify each record. So I'm going to go to the first field, I'm going to call it ID, and then I'm going to go across to the left and right click and select primary key, and you can probably see here there's a tiny little key that's been added next to this field. Next, we need to set the field type, and we can see there's lots of different options available. If we use the drop down there, all these different types of field types can be used, and here I'm going to select integer. And the reason I've done this is because I want to go down here and set auto value to yes. So the database will automatically allocate a new number to each record, and we can only do this if we use the integer field type. Next, we need to define our other fields, so I'll type them in and add some optional descriptions. And as we can see, all of the new fields have defaulted to text variable character, which means that the database will store only the number of characters entered rather than reserving a specific number of characters for the field. Here I'm going to set name to be a field which is going to be required, like that, and also the same for SoC, the processor on the single board computer, so the user will always have to enter data into these fields. And then I'm going to set the fields to record the SBC's RAM to be a tiny integer. I'm going to do the same for the USB 2 ports. And I'm going to set the variable recording the amount of onboard flash storage to be a small integer like that. And if you're wondering, a standard integer field can store a value ranging from about -2 billion to +2 billion. A small integer can store from -32768 to +32767, and a tiny integer from -128 to +127. So the settings I've chosen will be fine and efficient for our purposes, but I could have been wild and have set all the numerical fields here to integer. Oh, and I've just noticed I really want to have a space in my field definition there just to make that look neat. Lastly, I'm going to set the onboard Wi-Fi field to be a yes/no boolean. That's a simple flag. I'm going to do the same for the SATA ports, also a simple flag, yes/no, and the same for NVMe port as well, whereas yes/no, there it is right the way down there. And then finally, price is going to be set as a decimal. And if we just give ourselves a bit more space to see what's going on down here, I'm going to set the format for the field like that to be currency. You'd probably guess that. And it's going to be in US dollars because everything in computing is priced in US dollars. So if we now save this table, I'm going to call it computers. There we go. This table is now all set up. And we can see down here we've got a database object called computer under tables there. If we click on it, it opens up. Here is our table. Nothing in it so far, but there we are with things in it later on. And if we want to, we can go over here and set this preview pane to document, which now shows a preview of this table because it's the only table we can currently select. So let's now create two more tables in exactly the same fashion. And the first one of these is going to be for processor information, and it's going to have 4 text fields, the first of which will be called SoC, and this will be our primary key. So I'll click over here and make it the primary key. And I'll just enter the other fields. There we go. And I'd note you don't have to put in description fields, but it's always a good idea to make sure you know what's going on. And I'm going to make sure all of these fields down here, the architecture field, etc., they're all going to be set to entry required. I want to make sure this information is always recorded in this table. So there we are, that's okay. And we'll save the table now. Almost forgot to do that. Must save our table. And it's going to be called processors like that. And there we go. And then we've got a final table to create, which is going to be a very small table just to store some values for a list box. So it's just going to have one field, architecture, like that. If I can spell architecture right, hopefully I can. Let's check. I think I have. And again, this obviously has to be the key field. I'll give it a description, list of ISAs. That'll do. And I'm going to save this table to be called ISA list like that. So now we've created all of our tables. We can see them here previewed. If we click on the preview, they'll come up like that and like that. And the final piece of table setup we're going to do is to go to Tools and Relationships, where we'll add in the tables Computers and Processors like that. And I'll just rearrange them on screen to make it easier to see. And if I now select SOC over here, click and hold, drag across to SOC over there, we've created a relationship between these two tables based on SOC. And it's a many-to-one relationship between computers and processors, although it could just as easily be a one-to-many between processors and computers. But however you look at it, the idea is that a single processor can be used in more than one computer, and the database now knows about that. Right, now that we've set up our tables, we need to put some data into them. And the easiest way to do this is just to click on a table like that to open up our ISA list and to enter the data directly into it. And here that's exactly what I'm going to do, because this is a very simple table containing a very small amount of data. In fact, that's all it has to actually hold. So there we are, we can close that down and that is finished. But to put data into our other tables, we're going to create some forms. And the first way you can do this is to create a form in a design view by clicking up there. This gives you a completely blank form where you can pick up different elements, put them on the form and build things up one element at a time. But this can be rather slow, so we're not going to do that. We will not save that form and we're going to use the wizard. And the first form we're going to create is going to be based on the table processors, and here are all the available fields and we can put them all onto the form by clicking like that. We'll then click on Next, where it says do we want to add a subform. We don't right now, but we will do very shortly on the next form. But for now we're going to click on Next, and here we can see a form has been created, and currently the data is going to be displayed in a tabular format. But I'd rather have it on a record by record basis, so I'm going to click like that, which looks, I think, much better, and we'll click on Next again, and we're now asked if we want to be able to modify or delete or add data using this form, and for now we'll just stay with the defaults. Finally here we can decide on the colour of the form. It could be red, it could be violet. I think I'm going for iced blue. And then finally if we click Next, we have to give the table a name. It's defaulted from a table name, so we'll click on Finish. And there we are, we've got a rather nice form, but I want to make a few changes to it. So what I'm going to do is to close it down and then open it up again by clicking on Edit from the menu like that. And in fact, now that I've done that, we can go back and forth between the Edit mode and the Live mode by clicking the Design View button up there. Anyway, what I want to change is the architecture field here, because at the moment this is free text entry and I want to constrain this field to a particular list. And this means we want to work on this particular data field. Now, right now, when I've selected it, I've picked up both the data field and its label. If I move it, the whole thing will move around like that. Let's put it back with Control Z. And to work on the individual data field, I can either select this and go to Ungroup, but that's probably a little bit of an overkill, because what you can do is to hold down the Control key, click on a particular element, and there we are, we've just got the data field. So, if I now right-click, I'm going to go down to Replace With and replace it with a list box. And this will present the user with a set of choices when entering data, and they have to use one of those choices. And whilst we're here, it's worth noting there's a similar thing called a combo box, which also presents the user with a list, but here the user could enter something different from a list if they want to. That's not what I want here, so I'm going to go with list box. And it doesn't look like much has changed, but it has, because if we go back here and we right click and we select Control Properties, you'll see it is now a list box. And if we go across to data, we can see it's going to the right field, and currently it's going to take its contents from a value list, which we could enter here if we wanted to. If we click down there, we could enter some values, but I prefer to store values in a table, and therefore I'm going to select Table, and the list content's going to come from ISA list, which is the table we just put some data into. And when you select a table, you have to tell Listbox properties which field in the table to use. You do that numerically, and we want the first field, which is actually field 0. Why this defaults to 1, I have no idea, but we need to change that to 0. And so there we are, we can close that down. If we now click out of design mode into entry mode, there we are, you can see we have a little list box. Although it doesn't work particularly well there like that, so I think maybe we should alter the design a little bit. So we will do that. There we are, we've got a bit of space, let's try again. And oh yes, that's looking much better. And let's test it's working by entering some real data. There we are, we've now got some data in our database. We can move on to the next record, come back again, everything's working okay. This said, I don't particularly like the display of a list box like that, so I'm going to go back into the design view and change things around a bit. I think I can Control Z to take things back to this original spacings like that, and then I'm going to pick up the field again and go back into Control Properties, and over in General, if we scroll down like this, we can turn this into a drop down like that, which is rather exciting, as you can see. And if we now go back to the entry view, that's much better. We can pick the values from a list. So now I'm going to enter a bit more data. And there we go, we've got some data in the system, which is very exciting indeed. But we now just save this. There we go. We're going to do something even more exciting, which is to create another form with a subform. So let's go back into the wizard like that, and this time we're going to use the table computers. We'll take all its fields over there like that, and we'll click on next, and we're going to add a subform which will allow this form to draw data from more than one table. So we'll click on next like that, and we're going to base our subform on the processors table like that, and we're going to add all these fields across there. And you might be thinking we're going to be duplicating the SOC field on the form. That is true right now, but we have to add it because of this next step over here, where we're going to join the two forms together. And we're going to join them using the SOC field like that. We'll then click on next again, and we can pick the style of our form. Again, it's come back with things in that tab with the format, but we're going to go back to the record format like that and like that. That looks okay. And then we'll go next again. Again, we'll pick the defaults here. I think this time we'll stay with the default colors as well. Let's be wild. Next on that, we'll save it as computers and finish. And there we are. We've now got our form. And if we go down there, you'll see we've got all the different elements down there. And again, I want to edit things. I'm going to close it down and open it up again. There we are. There's our computers form and edit. And I'll just move things around to make it neater. There we go, that has started things off, and I'm going to get rid of this SOC field on the subform because it duplicates the field up there. As I said earlier, let's just delete that, and we can now move those up as well. All very exciting. And in fact, if I click on one of these data fields as part of that subform and we go to form properties, you will see here it definitely is the subform, and the data here is coming from the processors table. And you can see the fields are linked together via the SOC field, even though it's no longer on the form. And because the subform fields are only on this form to display data, we don't want to accidentally change anything in the processor table. I'm going to set allow additions to no, allow modifications to no, and allow deletions to no. And this will apply for every field on the subform. And here I think our price field looks a little bit small, so I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. That I think will be better. And I also want our SOC field here to be a list box. So again, we're replaced with list box, and then we'll go back in again and make a few more changes as previously. I'm going to straight away turn that into a drop down over here like that. And then in data, we're going to have the data coming from a table. The table is going to be the processors table, and the bound field again has got to be 0, and that hopefully will work. So there we are, and now moment of truth. If I click over here with the design view, and yes, this should be okay. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? And again, I'll try entering some data. And right now the subform is empty, but if I click on the save icon there, it brings the data across. We've got two tables working together. So now I'm going to enter a bit more data. And just to show you don't have to click on save, if I go to the next record here and come back again, the SOC information has populated on this form. So I'll continue with my data entry. And there we go. We've now got lots of data populating our database. Right, it's now time to ask our database some questions. And to do this, we're going to go to Queries and click on Create Query in Design View. And the first thing we have to do when we set up a query is to add one or more tables, or indeed other queries. And here we're going to add the computers table and also the processors table. And I'll just rearrange things neatly on the screen. There we go. We can now see all the fields in each table, and the relationship between the tables that we established earlier is also indicated. So let's start out with a very simple query which will output all of the data in the database drawing from both tables. And to do that, I'm going to add all the fields from each table to the query down here. And we can do that by clicking on the wildcard at the top for each table like that. And if I now run the query by pressing F5, there we are. All of the data in the database is being outputted by the query. We can see it at the top there in the preview pane. Not a very exciting query, but we might find it useful in the next segment of the video. So I'm going to save this now as all data. And with that done, I'm going to go up to View and get rid of the preview like that. And we're going to get rid of our columns we've added here and do something a bit more exciting. So those have gone, and we'll now add just a few specific fields to the query. And we're going to add specifically name of the SBC, its architecture, its SoC, its RAM, and whether it has onboard Wi-Fi, an M.2 NVMe port, really should be slot, I called it port for some reason, don't know why, and we'll also add in the price. And if we run this query like that, there we can see the output, just those fields being displayed. And maybe we want to sort things, maybe by architecture. We can do that easily. We can go down to Sort under Architecture and do Sort Ascending like that. If we now rerun the query, you'll see everything is sorted by architecture, ARM at the top, then going down to a RISC-V and a x86. But what if we want to see only the boards that have got an NVMe M.2 port? Well, we can do that by going down to Criterion, and under Criterion for NVMe port, we can enter a 1, which means a yes. And if we just now run the query, there we are, it's constrained the output just to that. And what if we only wanted boards with one of those ports and onboard Wi-Fi? We could put a 1 in there as well, like that, run it again, and there we are, we can just see those 3 boards. And again, I think we'll save our query, and this time I'm going to call this NVMe Wi-Fi. But let's also try something else. I'm going to get rid of these criteria like that, because maybe we want to know boards of a particular price. Maybe we want to know boards that cost maybe less than $80. And again, we can do that. We could go under there into criteria and go less than $80 like that. And if we run this query, we just see the boards that cost less than $80. But maybe the user of a database would like to enter their own maximum price. And we can do that as well. We can go down here and change that 80 to a question mark like that. And if we now run the query pressing our F5, it comes up and asks for a parameter input. So let's put in, say, $50. There's only one board left. If we try $150, we get a lot more results. So you can see that that works. And once again, I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this max price. And I'll just close this down, and you'll see we've been saving things. We've now got 3 queries we can see down here. There's one, there's the NVMe, and there is max price, which doesn't preview, but if I click on it like that to open it up, we enter our parameter. Let's go for $87.56, that very important number, like that. And there we are, all the boards that cost less than $87.56. Oh, and a final thing to mention here is if you want to, you can right click here and not just edit the query, you can edit in SQL view. You can edit using the structured query language. So if you want to, you can get your hands on the actual code. Greetings! Having now looked at database tables, forms and queries, let's turn our attention to reports, which are used to get data out of a database, traditionally in printed format, although these days you're more likely to export a PDF. Anyway, let's create a new report using a wizard. The wizards are good for this, and we have to pick something to base our report on. It can be a query or a table. We're going to use our all data query because we have created it. So I'm going to put all the fields across like that. Although I'm not interested in ID, I'm going to get rid of that one like that. I'm going to get rid of the extra SOC field like that. And I'm going to do a little bit of field reorganization. There we are, that seems most logical. So we'll go to the next step. And this tells us how our fields will be labeled on the report. And this doesn't have to be the same as the field name. So I'm going to shorten a few of these like that. There we go. I can even get rid of my word port I don't like there. We'll go on to the next section. And I think we'll group things here by architecture, by processor type. So we'll put that over there and move on to next. And I think after that, we'll sort things by name. That seems logical, alphabetically. And again, we'll move on to the next section. And I think it's worth us having a look at the report behind this now. We can see roughly what's going on there. I think I'm going to pick compact. So we've got quite a lot of data here. And I think we'll click on drafting like that. That's quite neat. Then move on again to the next section. We're going to give a title to the report like that as an original title. And it's worth pointing out here we've got options to either have a dynamic report, which means a report that shows current data, or we can create a static report. If you want to take a snapshot of data in your database at a particular time, you can create a report from it. It won't change when you alter data in the future. And finally here I'm going to click on modify report layout because it won't get this absolutely right. So let's click on that. There we are. And I think we'll just make it slightly bigger. Will it do that on the screen? That's a little bit better, I think. And I want to change the size of some of these fields because they're all the same size here, which is not logical. So I'll just make things a bit neater. And we'll save a report like that and close it down. And if we now open things up, here is report AA. That's not looking too bad. We can make a few changes to the width over there. Let's just do that. Let's make things neat. And after a bit of messing around, we've got a fairly decent looking report with our different single board computers listed under 3 architecture categories. Clearly there's more we could do here. We can mess around making this report far neater, but hopefully I proved a principle. And as I said earlier, we could here do a PDF export. And the final thing I'm going to show you on reports is that we can also do them running on queries with user input. So we just do another report using again the wizard like that. Let's go to our max price query and just add everything in. I'll do this really quickly just to show you the principle. And when it runs the report, it asks for a value. Let's put in, say, $95 like that. And there we are. We have a report based on a particular criteria. So there we are. We've seen how you can create different database objects, tables, queries, forms, and reports. Obviously, you can do a lot more than I've shown you in this single video. You can use a database application like Base or Microsoft Access to build a highly sophisticated, very polished end-user application. We don't have time to do that here, but hopefully I've provided a useful introduction to database fundamentals. Often, the best place to store information is in a text document or a spreadsheet. However, on other occasions, a database provides a better solution, and as we've seen in this video, it's pretty straightforward to set one up in LibreOffice Base. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.